Hey, folks, it is March the 25th, and we are going to start our last unit for the course for U.S. history, and that is it's titled Post Cold War. And so we're going to start this unit during the Cold War still, but as it's kind of winding down, right? If you remember, we left off last time, we had a lecture about the resignation of Richard Nixon, and that was due to the Watergate scandal. They found out that some of his operatives were stealing information from the other political party, the Democrat Party. And even though he was popularly elected and he had a lot of support when he ran for office, when this came out, a lot of Americans really didn't like him anymore. And so, let's see here. After the Cold War is the title, and this is from 1989 to now. So you're still living in it. You're living after the Cold War, right? So who knows what they're going to call the era you live in? Like some people have called it. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. Because like some people call it postmodernist era, some people call it post-colonial era. It's usually post something, right? So it's like, who knows? It's probably gonna be after when you're old. People will give it a name. So we say that the date for this is 1989 to now. 1989 is when we had the fall of the Soviet Union, and when the Soviet Union is going to be split up into a lot of it smaller countries, and Russia will then call itself the Federation of Russians, the Federation of Russia, right? So they're on paper going to become a republic like us, though I wouldn't want to live there if I had a choice in the matter, because stuff and reasons. All right, so we only got a few of these. So, hey, there's so Nixon's out. He had a vice president that I don't remember if we mentioned before or not, Agnew, and he's going to be out. We're going to see why in a minute. And so he's going to have a new vice president, and that's going to be this guy, Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford had spent a lot of his life in politics, especially in Congress, where he was like a minority leader, which means he was kind of in charge of the political party when it didn't have the most amount of people. I guess that's the way to put it. And so he's going to enter office, and people are going to be pretty optimistic about him, but he's going to do something that's going to make him pretty unpopular. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So, Gerald Ford. Before Nixon left office, his vice president, Spiro Agnew, not Andrew Agnew, I need to fix that typo. Let me fix it real quick, kids. Sorry about that. It probably auto fixed it. Is that how you spell it? It's like such a weird name. Yeah, Agnew. Yeah. Like whatever you do, if you have kids, don't name them Spiro. Like what's Spiro? Yeah, that's Latin for I breathe. So, okay, so Spiro Agnew was forced to resign due to accepting illegal bribes, I think from a company in Maryland. And so, which only added to Nixon's allegations of corruption as a president. They're like, look at this. His second in charge was accepting like money. That's like horrible. And so Ford will become as Nixon's vice president, right before Nixon leaves office. And so as Nixon resigns, before he is impeached, Ford will be sworn into presidency in 1974. And so, but there's only like a couple of years left on that presidency because, when a vice president comes in, he serves the rest of the term of the president that was they either left or was assassinated or died or something like that. Within a month of obtaining this position, Ford gave Nixon a full pardon. This led a lot of people in the press to believe that after all these other things to do with corruption, maybe Nixon persuaded or bought off Ford or bribed him for a full pardon. So Nixon had all of these charges being pressed on him. He left office. And then Ford, using the power of the presidency, said, "You're forgiven." So gave him a pardon. The pardoning of Nixon led to criticism for presidency. During Ford's presidency, the nation entered into a recession as unemployment dropped to 9% by 19. It was pretty high back then. It got really high here, way above that during the height of the COVID lockdown. But the recession meant a lot less people had jobs, but there was also a problem with inflation. And so inflation is when the price of things go up. You need more money to buy something. So if like a can of soda is 50 cents one year and the next year it's 75 cents, that's inflation. And so your money was worth less. And so they were having a big problem with that. They're also having a problem that's starting now, but we're going to talk about it in the next presidency, to where oil prices are going to get so high that there's going to be gas shortages in America. And so a lot of people are going to have a hard time getting fuel just to get to work. By the election of 1976, most Americans were very skeptical of both political parties and held a great distrust of professional politicians. And that went for both sides. A lot of people were really still bitter about Lyndon B. Johnson as president, Democrat. And a lot of people were bitter about Nixon and now Ford, the Republicans. And they're like, wow, these guys who've been in politics ever since they got out of school sure messed up a lot of things, and we resent them. And a lot of them are turning out to be corrupt. So there was a big sentiment in America to get an outsider, somebody who might clean up things, not care so much about politics all the time. So people really wanted to get away from the sense of corruption. There have been quite a few times in American history where this has come up. This comes up in all countries where there are elected officials. You'll have somebody running for prime minister, or president, or something like that. They're like, hey, I'm going to go in and fix things. Those guys and gals over there are all just they're greedy and messing up things. So this is one of those phases. Guess what? They're going to get an outsider. And he will be this guy holding a handful of peanuts. You're going to get a peanut farmer. And so, back then, people believed that Americans in general were a lot more sensitive to the idea of elected officials having like disagreeable lifestyles and stuff like that, kind of like Nixon and stuff like that. Like when a lot of Nixon's personal recordings came out, people found out that he was pretty vulgar and cussed a lot. A lot of people were like, oh my gosh, the president cusses. So that turned a lot of people off. This guy here, Jimmy Carter, he's going to be completely the other way around. He is going to be a very outspoken, born-again Christian. He's going to make a promise that he will never lie to the American people, that he's always going to be honest no matter what. He promised all these things that people were really wanting back then. And so Jimmy Carter, as Ford entered the 1976 presidential race, he's like, I'm going to be president for real this time. I'm going to run in the race. As a Republican candidate, the Democrats chose a relatively unheard of candidate named Jimmy Carter. Carter, a deeply devout Baptist, a one-term governor of Georgia. So that's his only political experience as far as I know. A naval officer, former naval officer, and a peanut farmer appeared to be a trustworthy outsider to voters. They're like, he did some things, but he hasn't been in Washington, D.C. And he seems like an honest, straightforward guy. People thought he was very nice, had a very nice personality. And, if he's a farmer, it's something that a lot of everyday people can at least relate to. The Republican Party, however, was showing division. Ford was even though Ford was sitting as president, he didn't automatically get the Republicans' nomination. Um, he had to win it against Ronald Reagan, who had spent time as a famous actor. And then he was governor of California for 2 terms. And as governor of California, he was very popular there. And he did a lot of things that made national headlines. And so, as he was making national headlines, especially like doing things like stopping violent riots and stuff like that, we're like, you're showing some leadership potential. Okay. And he was leading something known as the New Conservative wing of the Republican Party, whereas Gerald Ford was more of the establishment kind of middle ground Republican. Well, Ford's going to win the nomination, but he's not going to be very popular with the American people. So it's not going to help him out that much. Carter ran on shrinking the federal government and even claimed that his own party's Great Society that was made by Lyndon B. Johnson was destructive. And so he was like, his main criticism was that his own party's policies made the government too big and too intrusive into people's lives and wasn't doing all the good things that it intended to. In 1976, Carter won the presidency as a man who returned Christian principles to the office. So a lot of people, especially looking at Nixon, were like, the guy's lying, they're stealing, they're doing all this terrible stuff. Maybe we need to kind of go back to like our roots, going back all the way to the 13 colonies. That's how. There you have it. In comes Jimmy Carter. All right, last one I got for the day. So I only got 3. I wanted 4. I just couldn't do it. Oh. So yeah, these poor guys. So you might remember way back when, after World War II, we helped keep the Soviets out of a country called. And then, with the help of our CIA, our Central Intelligence Agency, our spies, we helped install a government there led by kind of like a kingdom, like a king known as the Shah. And so the Shahs were in charge of Iran, and they were very friendly to America, but they were known as being very oppressive to their own people. And so while this is going on, towards the 60s and the 70s, you're going to have a big religious revival in Iran of, I think it's Shia or Sunni Islam, led by a preacher known as the Ayatollah Khomeini. He's going to put out recorded sermons calling for a religious revolution in the country, and it's going to become popular. And people are going to overthrow the pro-American government. And these poor guys are Americans there who are going to be taken as hostage. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a big crisis during Carter's administration. So back to this. Carter entered the presidency to clean house by bringing his own associates from Georgia. And so he on purpose chose to not have people work for him as president who had been in Washington, D.C. and working politics there for a long time. He's like, I don't trust you people. I'm here to clean you out, all this stuff. Problem is, and this is going to come back and bite him, is because he did that, a lot of those people and bureaucrats and even people in Congress are going to work against him because they're going to see him as an enemy. And that's going to stagnate much of his presidency. He also wants to eliminate government waste. Some money that's not supposed to go towards a program or something like that, get rid of it. Reducing the size of the federal bureaucracy. He thought there was too many government jobs that didn't really do anything, right? Or didn't help people. And he also, like I said, ignored a lot of Congress's advice. You people broke all these things. I'm not going to listen to you. Carter was unable to help the nation's hurting economy, however. Remember, they're in a recession. And he was powerless to fix the energy crisis brought on by Middle Eastern oil embargoes. So, an embargo is when a country restricts how much something you get, how much trade. Middle Eastern countries were mad at us because we were befriending Israel, which a lot of the Arabic countries there hated. And then it's going to get worse because the oil we were getting from Iran is going to get cut off by this. This energy crisis was heightened by the overthrow of the Shah in Iran and the establishment of a government led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini in 1979. As the revolutionary forces swept through Iran, toppling the pro-American government, the U.S. Embassy in Tehran was overrun. You see, it's 1979. He's going to have to run for re-election in 1980. So he's got some really bad stuff coming on, and we're going to talk about more bad stuff when we come back tomorrow, right before he's supposed to run for office again. And everybody's going to be like, everything's messed up. Why would we pick you? So as the revolutionary forces swept through Iran, they toppled the pro-American government, and the U.S. Embassy in Tehran was overrun. And so an embassy it's when you have an embassy in another country, that's considered your soil. Like our U.S. Embassy here to France, that embassy building, we give it to France. They're allowed to have that property as their own country. And so you don't enter into an embassy because that's like invading a foreign country. And the ambassador in the embassy is considered the representative of a foreign government. So everybody, the whole world was like, you can't do that. That's invading their territory and you're arresting their diplomats. More than 60 Americans were taken hostage. And this embarrassed Carter and it worried the nation as videos and pictures of these hostages were put out into the American press. And people were like, what's going on there? Are you going to fix it? Well, we're going to see. He's going to try to fix it, but it's not going to turn out that well. And that's going to end it for today's short lecture. We're going to go through a few more when we come back tomorrow. Hopefully 4 more of them. And we should be able to make it pretty well into the Reagan administration. But this is going to be a pretty short unit because we're either going to stop on 9/11 or we might stop at the very beginning of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan on the global war terror. So, all right, kids, if you have anything that's missing an assignment, especially study island stuff, make sure you get it in. See you later. Yeah, it's a pretty short one today.